You are now tuned in to Hispanics Causing Panic, HCPX. We got a treat today. Roberto Diaz. This is a treat for us. Hardcore boxing guy, great matchmaker, well respected within boxing. We appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's been a while, and looking forward to having a good show and getting some questions answered, and see what's coming up on the schedule.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of start off with what a lot of people are wondering. What's next? Like, do you still want to do matchmaking? Are you looking into other promotional companies or anything like that?
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of questions on social media. Where's he going? A lot of rumors out there, even early on, that I was going here, I was going there. They're all rumors. There hasn't been any serious talks. I've had some offers out there. To answer the question, I really think that once a matchmaker, always a matchmaker. It's going to stick with me regardless of what I do, because you're always thinking, whether it's with a promotional company as a matchmaker or whether I work with an individual fighter or with fighters, you have that advantage now as a matchmaker of, does that style fit us? Does that style work? Right now, obviously, it's been about 5 months, just enjoying some time off. It was 15 years at Golden Boy, almost 10 years before that with Barrera. So just enjoying traveling, going places and just detoxing a little bit. But boxing's in my blood. I love boxing. I love working with fighters, more importantly. Even in the promotional side, it was my connection with a lot of the athletes that I worked for that gave me the motivation and the thrive, to see these fighters' dreams come true and seeing the progress. So right now, I'm really thinking that it's going to be more on the fighter side, whether it's as an advisor, whether it's as a manager, whether it's as consultant, whatever is required on the fighter side is probably where I'll be. It's going to be probably a lot less ongoing, like traveling. Like when you were with a promoter, you're going to shows almost every week or at least once a month. With the fighters, it'll tone it down, slow it down, and that's what I'm looking for right now. Maybe slowing it down, taking it a little bit easy, at least for a couple of years, maybe to charge the batteries, and then we might give it another go. But for right now, I'm just enjoying some good time off.
Now, you mentioned Marco Antonio Barrera. Now, you did an interview, I believe 3-4 years ago, with a guy we're friends with, Lukey Kettle, Inside the Ropes. And you mentioned to him in this documentary, I want you to touch on it and go in depth on it, is your chance meeting with Marco Antonio Barrera in a mall and how that sort of changed the trajectory of what you would do in the boxing in the future. Can you touch on that and where that took you?
Absolutely. I mean, when people say, hey, the dreams really come true, absolutely they come true. And you have to go search for the dream too. You have to be the dreamer and believe that they do come true. Very simple. I shopping a Christmas season in San Diego. Marco Antonio Barrera had lost to Junior Jones. I was a big fan of Marco, and this is before he even won his first world title. That group that came out of Mexico was a very hot group. Goyo Vargas, Marco Barrera, Miguel Ángel González, Carlos Bolillo González. I mean, it was a hot, young group that came out at that time. Yeah. And Marco was one of my favorites. Years later, Eric Morales comes around, but that particular group. So he loses to Jones. I bump into him as a fan. Back in that day, I mean, there was no cameras on the cell phones. I don't even think we had cell phones. So there was no way of getting a picture. Now, I think sometimes how things could have happened, if I don't go and search for him again after, because I saw him, I gave him, hey, I'm a big fan, the typical, as a fan, hey, keep your head up. You'll be a champion once again. And that's it. Obviously, there was no picture or anything because there was no cell phones. But I run around the mall trying to find something for him to sign. Had I not seen him again or not gone after to try to find him again in that mall, I probably wouldn't be on the podcast with you guys today. But I wanted to get something from him so bad, and this was the opportunity that when I didn't find anything at the mall, I'm very peculiar with the signings. You know, if it's a boxer, it had to be boxing related. Baseball, a bat or a glove or a ball. But I wasn't the guy that, can you sign the t-shirt? Can you sign the napkin? Can you sign a dollar bill? So when I didn't find anything boxing related in the mall, I, like a stalker, kept looking for him. He walks by again. And I said, hey, Marco, if I give you my address, would you mind sending me something? Again, I'm a big fan. Now think of it now, and how many times do fans go up to fighters or obviously today times have changed with the phones, and as long as they get their picture or they have something there for them to autograph, but you don't ask, can you send me something, and expect something to be sent. Mm-hmm. I did. He sends me a package a few weeks later, t-shirt, studio photo, autograph. And then a couple years later, he's going to fight in Indio, California at Fantasy Springs. It was outdoor. They hadn't even built the arena yet. And I read it. I lived in San Diego. So I said, hey, Barrera's fighting. Let me go watch him. It was a small fight. This is, I believe, like December of 99. And it's the fight he has right before the first Eric Morales fight. And there's already talks of him and Eric fighting. So I head out to Indio. I'm waiting. He walks in with his team to check in to get to the back of the dressing rooms, and he sees me. Now, it's been about 2 years, and he looks at me and he goes, San Diego? So he didn't remember my name, but he remembered me from the mall. And to me, that really got my attention because, like, wow, with all the fans he meets and then obviously through the years, Marco has a great, great memory. And I said, yeah, San Diego. He goes, come in the back with me. And he introduced me to the team. We went in the back dressing rooms. I mean, as a fan, I'm super excited. You know, you can imagine, like, wow, I get to meet Barrera. I'm backstage. He gives me a credential. Why don't you take pictures today? I wasn't a photographer, but I took a camera and I'm like, all right. And obviously the relationship built. He invited me to the Morales fight, the first one. It was one of the greatest fights, obviously, that as a fan we've ever seen, but to be partaking as a team member, a friend, an entourage made it even greater. I had my own warm-up that they gave me, and it was just really, really cool. The relationship built, grew. We're compadres today. I became godfather to his firstborn. And when he leaves his promoter and leaves his management team and signs with Golden Boy, that's just getting started at the time, and becomes the biggest fighter that they had signed, he calls me and says, at this point, I've been carrying the flag in the fights, and I'm involved in the Hamed fight as the flag guy, and just living the dream. At that point, it's not work. It's as a friend, as a guest. He'd cover me with the tickets. Goes to Golden Boy and he says, hey, I'm leaving my promoter. I'm going over to Golden Boy, leaving management, splitting. Do you want to come over with me? And again, I'm thinking as a friend, as, just support, be in the camp with him, talk, watch videos, watch the opponent. And I said, absolutely. And he says, okay, the fight had already been scheduled that he had when he got to Golden Boy and negotiated a contract. And his first fight was with Manny Pacquiao in San Antonio. We're in camp. You guys I don't know if you remember, there was fire, evacuation. I remember being in De La Hoya's cabin and the sheriff knocks, says, you guys got to get out. And I'm thinking, no. They let us borrow the house. Oscar De La Hoya let us borrow the house. I'm here with Marco Barrera. And he goes, mandatory evacuation. The mountain's on fire. You guys got to get out. Ooh. So there was a lot of things going on during that fight that a lot of times the fans don't understand what fighters face. Marco had lawsuits from the former management team. There was stories, headlines where he had brain surgery. The fight was on and off. HBO didn't want to get involved in the lawsuit, and it was just back and forth. On top of that, the fires in Big Bear moved camp. We moved to LA. The fires were hitting even as far as Tijuana, and we're thinking, wow, if the fires here in LA, we got to move again. Let's just go to San Antonio. And we thought every day that we were jumping those hurdles, getting through. But obviously it has an effect. You know, sometimes a fighter doesn't speak up, but you see the effect after the fight. You see the result. And obviously in front of us, what we didn't know at the time was a tremendous fighter. You know, Manny Pacquiao went on to have one of the best reigns in boxing history.
Wow.
But that night he was still that unknown. Hadn't really seen anything too special except speed. And, you know, the result was he beat Marco, and we thought it was going to be over at that point. And no, Marco came back stronger. At that point, Marco says, look, start negotiating my fights with Golden Boy, opponents, purses, this and that. And that's where I take that role. So back to the original thing is dreams come true. I mean, I never would have dreamt, you know, to be doing something that I was as a fan would have done at any time for free. I mean, you know, it went from meeting them in the mall to carrying the flag to later negotiating. And there was a moment there where he says, go deal with my fights and negotiate with Golden Boy and this, where I said, should I or shouldn't I? You know, it was a few days with no sleep of what if I ruin this man's career? I've never done this part before. I love boxing, but that's the message too to the fans, that you get an opportunity. If there's love and passion, take it. Worst thing that could happen is you slip, fall, learn from it, get up and keep going, because sometimes that second opportunity doesn't come by. And because I took that opportunity, it later led me to working at Golden Boy, 15 years, working with some of the greatest athletes that ever stepped into the ring. I still have a great relationship with a lot of them. And you learn. I mean, it's like high school, college, and move on to the universities. And, you know, you learn from every chapter, and to do something you love and get paid for it, that's just the bonus.
Yeah. And we already got questions loading up from the chat and the viewers, and we'll get to those because a lot of interesting questions that people want to know about some current fighters that you work with. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you this, because D-Style and I we're content creators, but we're hardcore boxing fans, have been for decades. And what we're seeing is there seems to be a disconnect between the supplier side and the demand side, from the boxing fans to boxing's power brokers now more than ever. Do you think power brokers see that? The people actually putting on the fights see that? It seems like for us boxing fans, we're getting more fights staying on paper. We don't, as hardcore boxing fans, we don't like mythical matchups. We like real fights. Do you think that power brokers are seeing that? Do you agree with that sentiment?
I agree 100% with what you're saying. I do agree that they're seeing it. I was seeing it. It's just what needs to be done. Look, if Don King and Bob Arum were able to work together, even though they hated each other, anybody can work together. If it makes sense for boxing, ego has to be put aside. And you got to stop taking count. Well, what if I lose this one? What if I lose that one? And not take count. For the good of boxing, the best fights have to happen. There should be a reduction of belts and titles to show if this guy is the champion, everybody knows who the champion is. Back in the day, we had 2 champions. Okay, now there's 4. But if we can start unifying, I mean, look, the women are doing it. The women are doing it. They're unifying belts left and right. Everybody will tell you right now, it's very simple, even if it's not the best boxer or a diehard boxing fan like you guys. Who's the champ? Oh, Katie. Who's the champion? Oh, Clarissa. Because they hold all the belts. Until somebody beats them, they are the champion. So that's what has to be done. I think we're still in the effect, and I call it the Mayweather effect,
Yeah.
You know, fighters, that young generation that came up after Floyd, because he was the top guy at the moment. I want to be like Floyd. What does that mean? I need to be undefeated. I want to be rich. I want to be, you know, with the bling and have all the, you know, the cars and this and that. And I think we're starting to fade away a little bit out of that as that generation is starting to be on the, you know, close to retirement. And we're getting the next generation of fighters saying, I just want to fight the best. And you're seeing it. I think that's the Canelo effect. Canelo is willing to fight anybody, daring to take challenges. Now you got the kids wanting to be the next group. And what do I mean by that is, look, regardless of the outcome, Ryan wanted the Davis fight. Davis wanted the Garcia fight. You're getting Haney and Lomachenko. You had Teofimo fighting Lomachenko even before we thought he should be fighting. So you're starting to get that next group. I'm just hoping, like everything else, it comes back to the 80s, the early 2000s, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, Duran, Benitez, they all fought each other. They all lost at one point in their career, but 40 plus years later, we're still talking about Tommy Hearns and Marvin Hagler.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll be talking about some of that generation undefeated in 10 years from now, because we won't remember them because they didn't fight the best. I mean, you have world champions today, and no disrespect to one of them, but here's a kid that probably, and no disrespect, he probably wouldn't have been a world champion a few years ago, and now he's a 2-division world champion. And I mean, you know, regardless of how he got it, he is a 2-division world champion. Nobody ever take that away from him. But come on.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of these issues now. You're talking about the Mayweather effect. Well, one of them to me is the protection of the O. And what happens when you have multiple fighters protecting the O, it creates this like this gridlock in the sport, and fans notice it, right? It's like, are you guys really going to be fighting all the other guys before you fight each other? And how long are you going to make us wait? And we notice those things. You as a matchmaker, did you deal with that often? Like with guys saying, nah, I don't want to take those risks, or is that something you noticed a lot?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Almost every day. So here's the thing that I would at times obviously was frustrating. And then you'd read comments from fans, but why don't they do this fight against this fight? You know, this guy against this guy. And it's like, trust me, that's been thought of before. It's not something that's just new, but the obstacles are sometimes managers don't want to take the risk, because if my fighter loses, that affects my money. Trainers, yeah, we're not ready for that guy yet. Why? Same thing. Fighter loses, job security. Money's not the same. The more he wins, every time he wins, the scale goes up a little. Trainer, manager gets paid a little more, a little more, a little more. So as a promoter, one of your jobs is, yes, you want to build a fighter, you want to build a champion, you want to build business to get a return, because the majority at the beginning is all investment. You're not getting money back. You're investing, spending, get an opponent, travel, food, medicals. The undercard, normally you don't get a license fee for. That only comes from the main event, which you start building fighters under the main event. So you don't want to get your investment beat, but at the same time, you want to provide fans with good, entertaining fights that they're going to buy tickets for, or they're going to tune in the network. So they have to be competitive. Now, the zero effect, that came because it worked for Floyd. I mean, Floyd was once in a lifetime type fighter. It worked for him, and he benefited off that. But let's go back in history, and many of the greatest fighters. I mean, my favorite fighter, Muhammad Ali, he lost, you know, but losing is not a career ending. Imagine the Super Bowl where you're not getting the two best teams playing at the end of the year, or the World Series, you're not getting the best in the league, or the NBA. You know, boxing's the only one that, because it's not a league, we're not getting the best against the best at all times. Now, I've thought about it, and I've mentioned it several times back when I was a Golden Boy. if we could do once a year a coming of all promotions, or even on a smaller stage, imagine once a year. And I mentioned it to Matchroom, I mentioned it to the Zone, I mentioned it to our side. I go, when I was there, once a year at the end of the year, Matchroom's best against Golden Boy's best.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, it's the good for boxing. Fighters are going to win because they're going to get paid. The promoters are going to win because they're going to get paid. But boxing wins. The fans win because at least once a year, you know, you have that Super Bowl, you have that World Cup, you have best against the best. And it's fun because it's competitive. Oh shit, you guys got me this time. I'm gonna get you back. Let me start building next year one of the top guys to come back and beat you. But again, sometimes it's ego, sometimes it's hard to bring them to the table. It's I get this, you get that. I want the majority of this, I want the majority of that. And it's like, look, if you're bringing 50-50 to the table, then split 50-50, bottom line.
Are exclusive network deals getting in the way of a lot of big fights? I'll give you a specific example, which I'm sure you know. Munguia versus Charlo last year. The rumors were that fight fell through due to network issues. Is that becoming a big obstacle? Exclusive network deals once you sign with the promoter?
Because when the fighters want something, it could get done. I think Davis and Garcia showed it. There was I remember, I don't remember exactly what fight it was many years ago, HBO and Showtime. They even shared Jimmy Lennon and Michael Buffer announced the HBO fighter, and Jimmy
Lewis and Tyson. Yeah,
I think it was a Tyson, right?
Lewis and Tyson.
So it can be done, but it just now needs to be that the fighters need to say, look, I want this fight. Let's get it done. That's why you got to applaud Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia went and said, I want this fight, and that's the only fight I want. And you know that the Monday night quarterback, oh yeah, he wasn't ready, he shouldn't have taken it. We can't have it both ways. We can't, as fans, want these fights to happen at 20, but then criticize, oh, he wasn't ready after the fact, you know? Look at a good example. Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns, their first fight, they were in the early 20s. Yeah. Today, the welterweight version of Leonard and Hearns, Crawford and Spence, are hitting their mid-30s, and they haven't fought yet.
I'm glad the Munguia name came up. Here's one from a hardcore fan's perspective, a criticism I've had of from the outside looking in, right? About Munguia, some criticisms that I have. I feel like sometimes I see Munguia and I'm saying to myself, what's being protected here? Just put him in there in some good fights. Win, lose, or draw, people are going to show up to watch Munguia because he's exciting to watch. Right? He's an action fighter. He's that guy. You could promote him like Arturo Gatti would lose. People would still show up to watch him, right?
Correct.
What I don't know, since you were there, right? What happened with Munguia in terms of some of these fights like not happening? Was it the handlers being too careful? De La Hoya? Like what was the issue there?
Look, personally, I can tell you Munguia has been wanting to fight the big fights for a while. Munguia is gotten so much better under Eric Morales. You could see a little, the original Munguia came in, and that's the progress of a fighter as he's getting better. More stiff, more just trade punches. Today, you see a little bit of feints, you see jabbing, you see bending, like he's having fun. There's more rhythm. As far as him wanting to fight the best, he's been ready and he's been wanting to fight the best. And look, at 40+0, there's no reason he shouldn't be. The thing that happened with the Charlo fight, the fight was pretty much all said and done, but they couldn't agree to allow the Zone to be an additional partner in the pay-per-view. Now, why is that important to the Zone? Why is that important at the time to Golden Boy? Why is that important to Munguia? When the Zone has been investing so much money left and right in Munguia and building him, it was only fair that that the Zone partakes in the event. It's not taken away. It's actually adding, because you have another outlet to sell. Just like when it's a regular pay-per-view, you have different distributions through DirecTV, through, so many others, that this was just an additional one. And then they were going to bring everything into the pot to split. Again, that's where everything needs to be put aside and said, look, for the good of boxing, put everything into the pot. Let's make this a big event. That fight could be done, and if it gets done, it's a hell of a fight. That's a hell of a fight, because you have two young, undefeated bulls, and it's just like, who is going to dominate? And I could see that going back and forth, different, one round going this way, one round going that way. But at the end of the day, boxing wins. I think the fight will get done. Knowing Munguia, it's time. He knows it, and I think that fight can get done. Hopefully sooner better than later.
Now, I want your kind of opinion on something we talk about a lot here. There's a lot of talk about being quote unquote pro fighter. We think of ourselves as pro fighter over here, but when most fans talk about being pro fighter, what they really are saying is they're pro the A-side fighter. They're pro the very popular fighters. They're not really pro like all the fighters in the sport, right? And what I mean by that is, too often it seems like I'll give you an example. Jermall Charlo hasn't fought. It's going to be 700 days by Sunday. Not even a scheduled fight, right? And when we speak out about that, we're like, yo, he's holding up the division. There's other fighters that would love to fight for that belt, right? And there's pushback. And it's from fans, right? Oh, Jermall Charlo's going through a divorce. He has a lot of problems. You need to be understanding. Mauricio Sulaiman comes out and he says, hey, he's going through mental illness. We need to be understanding. Well, I could empathize with someone going through something, right? I have to empathize with, and I know that comes off as pro fighter, but I need to think about all the fighters in the sport. And I think that when a lot of these top guys are holding up divisions, they're not fighting the best in their division. They're not active. It hurts everybody. So now nobody eats. The fighters below them don't eat. Their opportunities don't come. Everything is gridlocked. It's held. Do you think that there's maybe too much empathy from some fans towards like the very popular fighters in the sport?
Well, in the case of Charlo, it's a very delicate situation, and I'm not taking sides. I'm just seeing it how it is. Because of his issues, they make him like a champion in recess. That is, the champion in recess should be used in where there's injury, something, maybe a lawsuit with management or promotion where the fighter's not defending the title. But in this particular case, they did go to an interim champion, and Adames won the title, so that it's not just being held up and just hostage there. So if he's the champion in recess, Adames is now the regular champion. He can defend. When Charlo comes back, maybe he has to fight that interim champ or the current champion as the recess to make one. Absolutely. There's circumstances when it should apply and it shouldn't. To make you have a regular champion who's defending his title, and then all of a sudden a secondary or a third. No, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
But with cases like this, let's say, if you guys remember when Vinny Paciencia had that car accident, a major accident, something that puts him out of boxing, he shouldn't necessarily be stripped as a champion, because he won it in the ring, lose it in the ring. But at the same time, I agree, he shouldn't be holding it up if he's not going to fight over the next 10, 12 months, in this case, longer than that. But they put him in recess and made a regular champion for the time being to defend. Because of sensitivity issues now, they won't go in the strip. All of a sudden, then they'll get sued. It gets so complicated. But yes, what they need to do is just set a standard rule, and regardless of the situation, if it doesn't meet that criteria, then they have to make a move.
Do you think that, like, because again, it's coming from a hardcore fans' perspective, sometimes look. Let me preface it by saying this: I want fighters to get the bag. The more money they can make, better. They're putting their lives on the line. I get all that, right? I want. If they're offered good money, I say take it. So it's not even against the fight or nothing. Like I'm saying, take the money if it's there, right? And I wouldn't ask somebody to not do something I wouldn't do. I would take the bag too, right? But from a fan's perspective, sometimes I feel like fighters are, like Jordan says, Michael Jordan, like in basketball, like their guys get paid off potential before they actually prove anything. And then it's actually hard for them, they don't really have an incentive to prove themselves anymore. And I feel like in boxing, sometimes these guys get the bag, good for them, but then they don't want to take on a tough challenge unless they're going to get paid even more money, which there's no way to really justify the money they want. And I think that's another problem that we have in boxing. Is that something you've seen as a matchmaker?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So a great question. It does ruin it. Okay. And I'll give you a great example. And we just went through it a few years ago. So promoters come in, let's say a brand new promoter with a lot of money, and starts overpaying. And the fans are going to hear, well, that doesn't exist, overpaying. They're getting what they deserve. No. There is a pay scale. Just like anything else out there in the world, any job, there's a pay scale. And yes, there's some people that get paid more based on productivity. There's some people that get paid less based on, again, productivity. It's what you bring to the table, what you get paid for, okay? So all of a sudden, a fighter is taking an opponent that's C-level, per se, and they're getting paid, like you said, a big bag. And you're thinking, okay, that's great for the fighter, he's getting paid, but he's getting overpaid. And that's to send a message out there, look, we pay the best, come to me. The hard part was when you have a smaller budget than everybody else and still being able to provide some fights that are entertaining the people, but having to talk to the fighter and say, wait a minute, you're putting me in World War III for this much when so-and-so is getting a sparring session and getting paid 10 times more. How is that fair? And you're like, yeah, how do I counter that? But you could, you got to come up with everything. But what happens now when you step up that fighter, look, money doesn't grow on trees. You're going to overspend. And eventually, okay, money's down low now. Wait, I can only pay you this. No. You already got me used to sparring sessions for this. Now it's a real fight. So that's where the effect started to, like that snowball became a problem. Then you had COVID. COVID comes. Promoters are doing shows with no gate. If there's no gate, there's no concessions. If there's no concession, it just started to lower that scale. And I even talked to a couple of promoters and said, look, find the positive in every negative. We're going through COVID. This is our time to join and set a new pay scale instead of overpaying. Again, you're right. Fighters step into the ring, put their lives on the line, and deserve to get paid. However, what does deserve to get paid mean? Does that mean the promoter loses every time they fight? Because at the end of the day, it is a business as well for the promotional side, where if you're selling, an example, 60 tickets to an event, 60, but yet you're the best fighter in the world and you deserve millions of dollars. And come on, how are you showing me that you are the best fighter when you sell 60 tickets? Everything goes along. I've had fighters in the past saying, get me the kind of bums you get this guy. I'm like, really? Well, when you sell out an arena like that guy, and millions, hundreds of thousands of dollars come in from the sales or the views, no problem. I'll get you that type of opponent. But every fighter's different because every fighter brings something different to the table.
Yeah, because it goes back. I just wanted to say one more quick thing about that, just to follow up. So because that's what I'm talking about when it comes to like when fans say they're pro fighter, and I'll give you like a line I say a lot on the show. I would like if someone had a budget of $10 million or $20 million, let's say, right? Just putting a number out there. I would rather get 10 good fights. We got 10 millionaires now, than overpay two dudes 10 million for one fight that we don't even want to see. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a good example, piggyback off that, you got a young amateur fighter who won a lot of nationals and the expectation from all over, I mean, his circle coming in, management, trainer, father, mother, is okay, we got to cash in before they go pro. And you'll have a bidding war sometimes between promoters because they really want that kid, very marketable, won so many. My philosophy was always like, let's just say, to throw a number. Oh, the kid wants $100,000 to sign to go pro as a bonus. That's just the start. Okay, you know what? Let's go and sign 10 kids with $10,000 each. Maybe they didn't win as many nationals, but you know what? They're also hungry because they didn't win nationals. Now their only choice is pro. But if I sign 10, there's a chance that 3 or 4 might make it as a world champion. Or if I sign one and put all my eggs in one basket, if he doesn't make it, because it's not only that 100,000, it's over the next 3, 4, 5 years of the growth. And that kid, like you said earlier, maybe gets the 100,000 or the million up front, and that hunger is no longer there. I'd rather go the other route. Maybe he didn't win a national champion, but you know what? This kid has something to prove. He's hungry. He wants to go and do his thing in the pros. Maybe he wasn't suited for the amateurs. Maybe there was politics that got away. But I just think that you buy 10 properties or you buy one property, which chance do you have to get the investment back? You know, very similar. Not comparing
Roberto, I wanted
to properties.
Yeah, I wanted to get to some chat comments real quick. You answered this first question. Did Ryan jump the gun? We both appreciate that Ryan took that fight. But more concerned on the second question, on what you recommend to get him back on track after that loss.
Ryan, look, I signed Ryan to Golden Boy years ago. I know Ryan. I've done the outside of the Tank fight, which I was still there, did all the other fights, matched them. Ryan's a young man that has the talent. He trains hard. He's like a sponge. He'll pick it up. Jump to 140. I mean, he's growing. He's physically, you see the maturing in his body. He's going from the boy to the man. Get back in there. When it's time, when he's ready, get back in there and take a couple fights. And look, Ryan will be a world champion. If he sets his mind to it and dedicates to that, that's what he wants to do. Ryan will be a world champion at 140, no doubt. Again, no disrespect, but if Ryan fought Rolly tomorrow, Ryan wins.
That's what I was about to ask you. Wouldn't you jump right on that fight?
Absolutely.
Immediately?
Absolutely.
Immediately?
I take look, coming off a knockout loss, and he wasn't battered. It was one punch. But my strategy was always, I want to see a fight first to see here. He's not beat up. He didn't get beat up or anything. So, but this sometimes plays tricks more than the physical. You'll get over the physical in a couple weeks. But this, until that bell rings, you don't know how it's going to react because that plays a big part into the fight.
Do you feel like the public read too much into rehydration clause, catch weight, or did that really have an effect on him, do you believe?
I believe they read too much. It was, IBF does it all the time. What it was at a certain time in the morning. But after that, you can weigh whatever. So it was just a certain time, and it was really unnecessary, because if you say, okay, by 9 o'clock you have to weigh this, most of the time on fight day, you don't wake up at 6 in the morning to go eat breakfast. You're not waking up to go, oh, because I'm hungry. You already ate the night before. Sure, they limit you a little bit of what you can gain, but to be honest, you're more thirsty than hungry. You're not going to get 10 pounds of, liquids. It's the next day after you wake up and you have your breakfast and you have a light lunch. And Ryan's not a fighter that's going to gain a lot of weight anyway. So I think that was just, I don't know. I don't think it had the type of effect that people think it did or read that it did.
Cinnamon Don asks a question. Roberto, did Canelo duck Charlo and Andre?
Not at all. Canelo, in the years that I matched or that worked under him and was probably the easiest and the best to deal with, because you don't match Canelo. You don't match Canelo. He would tell you, this is who I want to fight, or his team would tell you, look, go get this fight done. There was times where I'd tell him, no, let's not fight this guy. And
who specifically would you have said that about?
I didn't like the Lara fight. But he wanted the Lara fight. The Austin Trout fight originally was on a Mayweather undercard. When Mayweather didn't agree to sign a contract and fight Canelo, because you didn't tell Mayweather how to do things, he told you. So when Canelo said, okay, I'll fight Austin Trout on your undercard. However, let's agree that if we both win, we fight each other next. And Mayweather's like, no, we'll deal with that after, but not now. So Canelo said, okay, if that's the case, I'm not fighting on your card. He went off and fought in San Antonio with 6 weeks to go and did over 40,000 fans, which that alone is incredible because of the period. But he was told, okay, if you go off the Mayweather card, you're going to make half. And when you're talking those type of numbers, any young fighter would never have done that. They would have stayed on the Mayweather card. But that just shows you his mentality. It wasn't about money. It was about principle. And he said, I don't care. And I remember even mentioning to him, if you're fighting for less money, let's take a different opponent. And he said, no, I'll fight Austin Trout. Austin Trout had beaten his brother, Rigo, and taken the title away. So he said, no, I'll fight Austin Trout, even if it's for half. That's things that sometimes the fans don't know about him. But this is a guy that, to think he ducked fighters, yet he'd go up to light heavyweight and fight Bivol, even before the Bivol fight, for those that know, like you guys, diehard boxing fans, and knew Bivol, knew that was a very dangerous fight. And it was a fight personally was unnecessary. Won the light heavyweight title. He had already made history. It's like Roy Jones went up to heavyweight, won the title, and went right back down because I'm not a heavyweight. He didn't come back years later to say, okay, I'll fight for the heavyweight title. I'd done that, did it, move on. But he went on and fought even a younger, fresher, better fighter than the original light heavyweight champion he had beaten. And that's just him, because he's always looking for challenges to motivate himself and for his legacy. And look, it's worked, because even with the loss, people ask me, who's the pound for pound fighter? I still say it's Canelo to me right now, because in his division, undisputed, and I don't see anybody around his division that you can say, oh, this guy beats him easy. No, he has to go outside his perimeters, outside his comfort zone for people to say, oh, this guy's going to beat him. So that to me, and based on his track, who he's fought, and the type of events and audiences he puts, to me, that makes the pound for pound right now.
As a matchmaker, real quick, as a matchmaker, what do you make of the narrative out there that's building? And you see hardcore journalists pushing this, that Canelo is ducking Benavidez to fight Bivol in a rematch. As a matchmaker, what do you make of that?
It's silly, because that's like saying, and look, I'm a fan of Benavidez. He's exciting. He's strong. But how can I be ducking the guy that beat? I mean, how can they consider that a duck if I'm trying to fight the guy that beat me over a guy that he's beaten everybody he's fought, but has he really fought a lot of top level? No. You know, it would be different had Benavidez goes into the semifinals and beats Charlo. Now he's at the finalist. Now he deserves that fight. But he beat Plant. Okay, that's a good win for him. But Canelo had already beaten him. So it's not like you beat Plant when nobody's beaten him. So Benavidez obviously wants that fight. And it's a good fight for the fans and everything. It's going to be a hell of a fight. But it's not like he's been earning those for years. I mean, he's had a couple good wins, solid wins. He's the new fresh face. But if we said right now, Benavidez against Bivol, still a hell of a fight. But could we say, oh yeah, Benavidez destroys Bivol? Probably not. Probably not. So it can't be that he's ducking the harder fight over. I'm not saying the softer fight because it's not going to be soft. I mean, when you get two Mexicans in the ring, it's just guaranteed war. But how about Benavidez against Zurdo? And then the winner, you know, because then you have the semifinals. Like you have that I earned it, not just I want the payday or I you know, oh, I deserve it because of what I've done. If you haven't really done a lot, then you know, what have you done? But if you now go and beat Zurdo, or you go and beat Charlo, or you go and beat the other top guys in your division or around your division, then definitely you deserve the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Do you think there's like a disconnect sometimes with journalists and some fans and not really understanding or grasping what Canelo has accomplished and done? Like because I think there is, because I hear things. To give an example, like there's people in the media right now saying that they think Canelo's going to fight Berlanga in September. Like, oh, you know, Canelo, he doesn't like to give the fans what they want. He's just going to do what he wants. And I'm not sure, like, people can grasp what he's done. You know, like you mentioned it earlier, there was a Mayweather effect. Now there's like a Canelo effect. And I don't think he gets credit for that. He gets called a diva by some people in the media, by some fans. Did you experience a quote-unquote diva when you worked with Canelo in any way, shape, or form?
You know, I mean, it's no. I'll say no right off the bat. No, I experienced a very mature fighter, young man, early on, very mature, somebody who knew what he wanted, very dedicated, knew what he wanted to leave behind, his legacy. Miguel Cotto gets a very similar, you know, attack, and oh, he's like a diva. He's you know, like, I don't know, they say stuck up or that. Miguel Cotto is a shy guy. Believe it or not, he's shy. He's quiet. That's just his personality. But outside, Miguel Cotto's one of the funniest, one of the greatest, he's very family oriented, I mean, what can I say? But it's like in their circle. When the cameras go on, keep in mind, and it happens a lot more today with social media, you say something, but it's changed easily. Or the titles put something to get that bait.
Yeah.
That, you know, that click, that like, and then you go into it and it's nothing to do with the title. But you listen through 5-10 minutes of it, and it happens. And imagine, so now they're going in like this, and I've noticed this more today or in this era than back in the day, is you don't have as many journalists today.
Mm-hmm.
You have boxing bloggers or reporters but it's not really journalism. And what I mean by that is it's more opinionated than the report. So you'll have a report from media, and that always frustrated me was, oh, this fight's horrible. It hasn't taken place. Now, if I did a fight and we put on a fight and it was horrible, After the fact, write about it. It was a horrible fight, but don't kill the fight before, because then when it turns out, and if it turned out to be a good fight, they wouldn't report, oh, I was wrong. This ended up being a good fight, blah, blah, blah. You know, so the opinionated journalism doesn't work for me. I mean, it's like you can have your opinion as a journalist, but when you're writing about something, this is a mismatch coming up. Well, how do you know? It hasn't happened yet. How many people thought Munguia and Rosado was going to be a mismatch? And even though Munguia won the majority of the fight, that was one I took proud of in making, one of the few that I made of Munguia, because I knew Rosado was coming off that win with Beck, was very motivated. And look, when you have a veteran that's fought them all, he deserves that one more, you know, that next shot. And he put on a great performance because experience and pride comes in, and there's the talent. So it made it for a very exciting event, a very exciting fight. And it was one of my favorite of Munguia's.
Now, I wanted to follow up on the question below, because the last time you were on HCP, you did mention that there was an offer that Eric Gomez made to the PBC side. I don't know if it was directly to Al, but just I vaguely remember. But there was that offer. What do you make of people that say Canelo ducked Charlo at 160?
No, there was an offer. There was an offer. I don't remember the specific number, but I remember the reply was something like, "Oh no, we're far away. We're like moons or universe apart." So, you know, the problem was that a lot of times when it came to Canelo, regardless of who the opponent was outpricing themselves. They had never made anything near that. And sure, you're fighting Canelo, you deserve to get your best pay ever, but not when it's like 5 to 10 times that. Now beat Canelo, and then you have a claim to say, okay, you know what? Now I'm the man. And not necessarily does it always happen that way. You could beat the man and not be the man, but at least that's a step in the right direction. But a lot of fighters, because of this, it's all about the money now, just wanted to fight Canelo, not even with the mindset of winning. And I'm not in their mind to say, oh yeah, they were already going in to lose. No, they were already getting, I already won. Why? Because I'm getting paid. So the mentality should be, I want to go in there and win. You know, we go back to the Sugar Ray Leonard, Duran, Hag. I mean, I mention that all the time because that's one of my favorite eras. They all fought each other, and it's always been about the money. That's why it's prize fighting. However, it didn't seem to be like a deal breaker. If I don't get this, I'm not fighting. If I don't get, it was more about, I got to fight him because I want to be, if I want to be the best, I got to beat that guy, and I got to beat that guy. And they all fought each other. And that's what made that era. And look, you go years later, De La Hoya, Vargas, Trinidad, Corte, that mix, they all fought each other at a young age, not at their 40s. And it's a shame right now we haven't seen Crawford and Spence. I mean, that's too high level IQ, talent, tremendous fight. I worked with Spence for many years. I had a lot of love for Spence. Crawford, even though I don't know him personally, I mean, I met him a couple of times, but I don't know him on a personal level. Crawford is one of the only fighters. I always like to compare eras, and not that I'll match them or the fantasy matches, but I always say, oh, you know what? This kid reminds me of so-and-so from back in the day, and this guy reminds me of so-and-so. Crawford is one of, and I always say that the era from before beats the era of modern era, whatever that, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard over the Trinidad, or Hearns over the Trinidad. Crawford is one of the only fighters that I personally think would have competed in any era.
Me too.
That's how good I see him. You know, that mythical matchup, I rarely do it. I read the other day a fan put, what happens with Crawford and Pryor? And I'm like, ooh, this is a good one.
Yeah.
Crawford's a killer.
And I ended up going with Crawford, just the adjustments. And he reminds me of a smaller version of a Marvin Hagler.
Yeah.
He's a killer. I got one last question before, just one last question. Virgil Ortiz, coming off of Rhabdo multiple times, he's going to be fighting Stanionis, a fight that a hardcore boxing fan like myself loves. Love that fight, particularly being that the welterweight division has been in such a funk. Love that fight. Stanionis is not a guy you swerve into. I thought he looked better than expected against Butayev. Spence's team has been paying him step aside money after step aside money. That's not a guy you go out of your way to fight, and Virgil's doing it. How do you see that playing out in July?
Virgil's passed every single test that's been given to him with flying colors. I mean, the kid's perfect knockout ratio, undefeated. You know, I mean, the kid just is tremendous fighter. I have a lot of love for Virgil. Very dedicated. Unfortunately, went through some challenges that I now know that are completely done and past and behind him. I can't wait to see him back in that ring. I can't wait to see him. It's not going to be easy. This is the toughest fight of his career, of his life at this moment. But that's how it should be. He's fighting for the world title now. He's not getting anything handed to him. He's doing it the right way. But he's been built for this moment. Little by little, he's passed every single challenge. Oh, this one's going to take him the distance. Oh, this one's going to take him the distance. Oh, this one's dangerous. You know, at the Mean Machine fight, I got nervous at the weigh-in. It was a little too late to get nervous at the weigh-in because it's done and over 24 hours away. But I got nervous at the weigh-in when I saw Mean Machine get on that scale, and I said, wow, this guy is more than ready. And I remember, you know, hey, you don't have to go after this guy. You know, let him come to you. Jab is key. Keep him at a distance. No need to trade. And what happens? Virgil got clipped, I think, in the first or second round. And it's like, okay, use the ring, box, move, get your leg. And Virgil's a young lion. I mean, he went after and trading. I'm like, no, don't trade. That benefits Mean Machine. And it's like, that prepared him. He look, Virgil is dedicated. Virgil is hungry. Virgil is not worried. See, that's what I'm saying about the Canelo effect. Virgil is not worried about what if I lose my O. Virgil's more worried about I want to fight the best. And in order to consider myself the best, I got to beat the best. And he's daring and he's willing. That's what we have to applaud. Young fighters like this that are willing and daring to fight the best.
Yeah.
Anything else, Lisa?
Sorry about that. Look, I did want to go ahead and ask you one last thing. As far as because look, if I go to Google and I look up bad management, in my opinion, a picture of Andrade pops up, right? Like, because I don't know, this is a guy who's like been chasing Canelo by name, right? But he hasn't really like. When the opportunities come up, he could have fought Zach Parker, and if he would have won that fight, he would have been a mandatory for Canelo. But he didn't take that fight for whatever reason. So Ryder came in and he took it from him, right? Just as an example. Back in 160, do you remember anything going on with Canelo and Andrade? Any negotiations, any talks, or anything of that nature?
You know, to be honest, his name never really popped up, and I know I remember a video he made, something of an apartment, and I don't exactly remember what he did, but it was like a funny video where he's trying to get into Canelo's head of stop running or stop ducking and this and that. Outside of that, I do not remember negotiations even coming close to even talks about him. He was never really talked about. And look, he's a very good fighter. I faced him with one of my guys, Jason Quigley, not too long ago, and he looked tremendous in that fight. Knocked out Jason and sent him with a fractured jaw. He's very talented, but it's almost a very similar case that I would say in the Benavides. Yes, you're undefeated. Yes, you're a champion. In fact, he's multiple division. But get to a final, beat the semifinal and then call out for the fight because you deserved it, you've earned it. Not just because winning a title. Remember, today winning a title, and it's not demeriting any of the belts or champions today, but there's many more champions that we've ever had, more than ever. So to become a champion, okay, there's other 4 or 5 in your division as well. So maybe become the best in that, and then you have a claim. Look, one thing that's for certain, and I've seen it through the years with Canelo, if the fans want it and push it enough, he'll end up fighting that guy. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't help either that Andre fights once. When was the last time he fought? Was it Quigley?
He fought in January.
He
fought in January, but it was not a good opposition. He was buried on the Tank Davis Hector Luis Garcia undercard.
You're right. So it's like you got to stay more out, and that's the thing. A lot of these guys are staying out there, not, well, why be active and run the risk of losing when I could just wait and see if I hit that lottery? You'll be making more money, staying sharp, even if it's less purses. If you're active, you're staying sharp. So when that big fight comes, you're not, sedentary. And then all of a sudden, ring rust and everything else plays effect. Now, by staying active, a lot of times you're staying out of trouble. The weight's down, and you don't have to start getting ready for the big one. It's sponsors come in and just you're busy. It's a baseball player. How are they good? Hey, practice. Right. Every other sport, but boxing recently has taken a turn of, if I can fight every 2 years and just take the bag once, why put more miles and damage on me? Right. Canelo showed it over a year period when he went and wiped out the whole division. Money's going to come with the victories and your performances.
Exactly. Now, just one more follow-up, and I want to thank you again for your time. I just want to ask you one more follow-up in regards to what you just said, because I know what some critics are going to say, and I want you to have a chance to respond to what they're going to say, right? Well, what they're going to say as a follow-up to what you're saying is, while you're asking Boo Boo Benavidez to, do a little more to maybe earn that Canelo fight, but Canelo, he did fight Yildirim, he fought Ryder. What did these other guys do that he has fought? They didn't need to, quote unquote, do what you're asking Boo Boo and Benavidez to do. Like, to that, what would your response be?
Well, I mean, one, okay, so you rather see Canelo fight once every 2 years rather than do the Yildirim or look, Ryder, as much as fans can say, and I'm not saying it because the fight's over now. I said it before the fight, and I was in Guadalajara. I told close friends, mutual friends of Canelo and mine that, hey, don't, this guy's not to be taken lightly. I didn't expect a knockout. It was a one-sided fight, but you got to give Ryder a lot of credit, and we have to remember one thing. Whether it's Yildirim, whether it's Ryder, whoever, they're all physically bigger guys than Canelo. Canelo came from, whether you want to say welterweight or super welterweight, at 5'9" at the most. He's fighting guys that are naturally bigger. And every time he steps into that ring, these guys are just getting. Look at Ryder. I saw it right away when they were in the ring. Canelo's normally the thicker guy. Even though he's usually the shorter guy, he's normally the thicker guy. And if you look at Ryder's legs, they were way thicker than Canelo's. And normally Canelo's legs and torso y todo it's thicker, but Ryder was physically that much bigger. So not only is he fighting guys that, like when Sugar Ray Leonard fought Daniel Alon or Oscar fought Hopkins, I mean, guys that normally, or Duran fought Barkley, these guys are normally that much bigger. And when they step in the ring, there could even be that much more. So those Yildrims, those Riders, yeah, to some of the fans, they didn't deserve it. That's the organizations. So if he doesn't, does he take a leave of absence? Does he just not fight and stay sharp for when that big fight comes? I mean, you got to look at it that way. I rather see, and not necessarily I'm saying Canelo, I'd rather see that fighter that I like at least stay busy. Julio Cesar Chavez would have a good fight, tough fight in Vegas. Go back to Mazatlan, go back to Guadalajara, go back to Mexico, and have a couple fights in between. Oscar, I think, on one of his busiest years, had 5 fights. I mean, in order to stay sharp and be ready, it's doing what you do and just continue doing it without getting stale and rusted.
Oh, for sure.
We appreciate your time, Roberto.
We appreciate your time. By the way, the last time you were on HCP, you did mention that JoJo would fight anybody. You said it on the podcast, and a bunch of people were saying he was going to duck Haney. Surely enough, the man fought Haney. So he proved you right.
JoJo is one of those young kids that is he's a throwback. He doesn't care. Again, we're going back to that Mayweather era going away. It worked great for Mayweather. Look, one of the greatest businessmen, fighters to ever lace it up. But hopefully we will be back soon to the old days of boxing where the zero is not as important as going down and remembering and being remembered, because that's one of the things that the fighters love 20 years from now. A lot of times when you hear a fighter returning to the ring, the first thing we jump on and say, oh, he's broke, he needs the money. And in some cases that is true, but a lot of cases it's not even about the money. It's about, that's all I've been doing for all these years. I miss the love of the fans. I miss the walk to the ring. There's other things outside of the money that they come back for, because that adrenaline is very different than anything else that you can experience.
Yeah. Appreciate you, Roberto. Appreciate all your time.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep. Appreciate it. That is the great Roberto Diaz. We appreciate him coming on. That was beautiful. Beautiful. And a lot of the things we touched on, D-Style, is stuff we've talked about in the past is, guys not protecting the O, building champions, not records, not building just padding records and, not artificially doing things, just naturally doing things in boxing. And that's what I love about that interview is he just brings up a lot of the stuff we've talked about in boxing. He destroys some of the narratives we've been destroying about Canelo. Like, yes, you saw the Avni Yildirim fight, but it was buried between 2 fights that were 5 months apart. He fought in December. He fought in February. He fought in May. What else do you want? He's fighting. He's outpacing his peers on the top of the pound for pound list 3-1. At worst, 2-1. Do you not want activity? Inactivity is a serious
what's crazy is that they'll bring up a Yildirim name, and my question is, what you guys must not think very highly of these guys if you think there's just a tune-up for Canelo between 2 title fights. Is that really what how you think about those guys? I think those guys are good fighters. Their time will come, and I think history has shown us that if people want to fight, if they want to see Canelo fight somebody, he will eventually give you what you want. And he does it in a lot faster fashion than most fighters, quite frankly, definitely than his peers. He gives you quality and he gives you quantity. He gives you both, right? And September, if he fights in September, that will be 8 fights in 3 years. Errol Spence has fought twice in 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, let's just put that, let's step back and put that in perspective. Because when an Errol Spence fan told me, well, Spence doesn't fight tune-ups, well, I would think he does it because he just fights once every 15 months, right? So like, of course you're gonna fight a tune-up if you're only fighting once every 15 months, right? So that's just a point-blank period statement right there. But it was interesting. Another thing about the Mayweather effect, very true. We've been talking about it for years. But here's the thing about Mayweather. He was brought up through Top Rank, and they put him through the fire, bro. Gerardo Hernandez, very early in his career. Diego Corrales. He was an underdog against Diego Corrales, right? What made Mayweather special that he came out undefeated through the fire. Now they want to manufacture the O. That's the problem.
Mayweather fought 6 times in 1998, was Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year 2 years into his career, beats Genaro Hernandez in a legitimate title. 2 months later, defends against Angel Manfredi. This is what we're talking about, real fighters. Lomachenko loses to Orlando Salido in his second professional fight. What does he do after that loss? He doesn't disappear for a year. He fights Gary Russell Jr., the top guy in the weight class, 3 months later. It's losses. What do guys do after losses? They learn from failure. Failure is a part of life. they build off the loss, and you build champions that way, right? And it goes back to what we said. If you just put on the fights, just naturally put on the best fights, what happens? You accidentally build stars. You can't help but do it. It's going to naturally happen. The sport is going to do it for you.
You know what used to happen? Like, and we used to like witness this, like as fans, when fighters were more active and fighting each other. Like you remember, like when Barrera beat Morales, right? And then Pacquiao comes in and like destroys Barrera. We're all like in shock, right? And then they're gonna throw Morales in the ring with Pacquiao. And I remember most of my friends being like, "What are they doing? Like, they're gonna put the guy that lost to Barrera in there with the dude that destroyed Barrera? Are they crazy?" And then what happens? He goes in there and he gives Manny Pacquiao a boxing lesson, right? And like, nobody sees that coming. Like, Hopkins loses to Taylor. Okay, Taylor gets knocked out by Pavlik, and then Pavlik fights Hopkins, and we saw what happened when these guys fight more often. And we could go even more back, right? Roberto Diaz brought up Ali. Ali lost to Frazier. Frazier goes in, gets destroyed by Foreman, right? Mm-hmm. They think Foreman's gonna annihilate Ali. Like, people were worried about Ali's life, right? And then Ali goes in there and knocks out George Foreman. If these guys fight more often, the fans themselves are gonna see it's not that big of a deal, because eventually they're going to go ahead and fight. You know what I mean?
You know what's one thing that is going to make people's heads explode about that interview, though, is when Roberto says he still considers Canelo the pound-for-pound king. But as boxing fans, we understand what he's saying there is the level of difficulty of what he's doing. Take it's what we talked about a couple weeks ago when we saw the Ring Magazine pound-for-pound rankings come up, right? How is it that Errol Spence is ranked ahead of Canelo Alvarez when Canelo Alvarez, since Errol Spence last fought in May, fought in September, fought again in May, and by the way, he's going to have a fight scheduled in September before Errol Spence has a fight scheduled. So what do you consider more valuable? What do you consider more impressive? A guy going 0-0 or a guy going 2-1 when he's facing top 5 competition in and around his weight class?
Yeah.
Dmitry Bivol, number 1 in the weight class north of him. Gennady Golovkin, that was the guy number 1 in the weight class south, moving up. And by the way, it's a trilogy fight that he put to rest. And on top of that, you can say what you want about Ryder. He's a top 5 contender in the weight class, according to every top publication. And he's going to fight likely a rematch of a fight he lost next. What would you rather? Would you rather guys play safe? We need to be dictating. We need to be rewarding the behavior we want to see. So what would you rather? As big publications, as boxing fans, would you rather guys take on risk, assume risk, give you the fans you want, or would you rather guys lay up and play it safe? And we need to be rewarding guys on pound-for-pound lists, on divisional rankings, who are taking chances and doing things tough.
Yes. Like, I agree 100%. And right now we're just in I think there is a transitional stage. I do think the one good thing about this era is that now, like, you see a trajectory, right? And it's kind of like everyone, like they're going to copycat each other. So they just saw Canelo win Undisputed. So a bunch of other fighters want to become Undisputed now, right? That's the in thing, right? Like, oh, okay, that's what we got to do. Okay, I want to become Undisputed. Like, as soon as Canelo became Undisputed, Shakur started talking about it, and a bunch of guys started talking about it, right? Like, Crawford did it first years ago, but it didn't become a trend, right? And now, like, when a fighter is that good, they become a trendsetter, right? That trend could be good, it could be bad, right? It could be neutral. It just depends, right? Well, when Ali was fighting, he had a style that was very effective. Guess what? A lot of fighters in the 80s were fighting like Muhammad Ali, right? On the move with the jab, and then that's why Customato kind of built Tyson's style to beat that type of style, right? So boxing is a big trendsetter, like, sport, and we need, like, very desperately, we need to get out of this protecting the O and throwing fighters away when they lose, but people, like, here's the thing, they don't even throw fighters away when they lose. It's like none of it's true. Mm-hmm. Fighters lose all the time, and like people still follow them. It's like a worry that I don't even think needs to be there. There's guys, I can name them to you right now, win, lose, or draw, people are not going to care. They're going to watch him next time they fight. Okay, William Cepeda, people are going to watch him next time he fights.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Munguia, I'm still going to watch them. Win, lose, or draw. It doesn't matter because they're exciting to watch, right?
Virgil's one of those guys.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Stanionis is another one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Hurd lost so many times, people kept watching him because he was exciting to watch. Like the Towering Inferno just got knocked out. Guess what people are going to do? They're going to watch. I'm still going to watch him fight because he's exciting to watch, right? So at the end of the day, we need to get out of the phase of and I think it's slowly evaporating. I think it's slowly going away, to be honest with you.
And that's the frustrating thing we've talked about as far as how they've moved Benavidez, right? How they moved Tank is we don't care if those guys lose because they're exciting fighters. For years, I've been saying, is there a red flag we're missing with Tank Davis to where they're moving him this low risk, high reward, right? Why is he in some of these fights? Why is he in a fight with Raleigh? Why is he in fights with guys moving up in weight that aren't top 135 pounders? Why is he in these fights? Why, when he moves up, would it be a Matteo Barrios and not a Josh Taylor? And I think it's just mismanagement. And you see Leonard Ellerby always coming after me on Twitter for whatever reason. I'm just simply trying to tell him, we are fans of Tank. I'm a fan of his style. I watch him fight Ryan Garcia, and I'm like, good Lord, not only is he exciting, every punch is meaningful. He's a high IQ fighter. If you just put this guy in the fights that people care about, good Lord. I mean, just imagine how big this guy would be.
Well, you got to understand, though, that they're in a high right now. They just did 1.2 million pay-per-views, is what the reports say. So if we tell them, oh, he's not managed right, they don't even know what we're talking about. They think we're talking about popularity and all that. But me, when I think about boxing, I don't think about a fighter. I think about the sport, right? That's my mentality. I'm thinking about the sport as a whole, right? And his resume isn't there. Like 20 years from now, when someone's arguing with me, oh, yeah, Tank, he was the best of his era. Was he? Because no one's going to give a shit about pay-per-view buys and all that years when they're arguing who was a better fighter, right? And if Tank doesn't have the resume to prove he was the best of his era, then it is what it is, you know? I think Tank could be even a bigger star. It could be a bigger deal if he fights, you know, the winner of Haney Lomachenko. It's a bigger deal. It's a bigger fight.
Shakur, right? And Bob's out there yesterday saying we can't put on that fight right now because both guys are demanding too much money up front. It's not the old days when guys weren't as worried about the guarantee. They were worried about the percentage of what they would make off the fight. Bob's out there saying that yesterday. So, and Tank's side is saying the same thing. So it just seems like we can't get those big fights.
It's gridlock.
And that's a fight that everybody wants to see. Everybody wants to see if Tank could knock out a Shakur, which I don't think he could. If Shakur would outbox Tank, which we think he would, but we want to see it, right? And it's a huge fight. But they're telling us they can't fit a square peg into a circle hole. That's what they seem to be telling us. And as boxing fans, we don't care. We just want to see the fight. We want to see the fight. And it just goes back to what I say. I want to see these fights come off of paper and into reality, because when that happens, things we never would have expected to happen.
Yeah.
It happens all the time when you know, things we never expected to happen. It just happens. I wanted to ask you about this.
Sure.
Tim Tszyu, the WBO, I believe, out yesterday, saying that Tim Tszyu has to, or Jermell Charlo is going to have to fight Tim Tszyu by September 30th after this June 18th fight for Tim Tszyu. Okay. What do you make of that? Do you think Mel Charlo is going to fight that fight by September 30th?
I'm going to say no.
You don't think he's going to fight that fight? So you think he's going to drop that one belt and say, I'm not undisputed anymore, you can have it, instead of fighting Tim Tszyu?
I just feel like something's going to happen, but there's no. I just have a feeling we're not going to get the fight, bro. I just have this feeling we're going to end up getting like Spence versus Tszyu, which is a great fight, right? A guy that could step up and request a shot himself is Crawford as well. Actually, he's the WBO, right? I do think Jamal has been saying things like, why should I be paying all these sanctioning fees? And this is why we don't keep the belts, because all good points, I guess. And on the outside looking in, I could see why it's annoying to pay 30% to 4 motherfuckers. You know what I mean? But I mean, dude, that's like that's a good chunk of that's more than 10% of your purse. You know what I mean? 12% of your purse going to the sanctioning body. You know what I mean? So I understand, but at the end of the day, I just have this feeling. I hope I'm wrong, but I just think the fight's not going to happen. I think Mel is going to start campaigning 160. I think Maul's going to go 168, and I think Spence is moving to 154. I think that's the trajectory we're going, and I hope the sanctioning bodies learn their lesson. Look, you held up a whole damn division, 3 of them, right? For these guys can keep their belts, and they're moving up anyway. You know what I mean? Like that's something they're going to have to look at. But you know what they could do? They could do a hand-me-down, right? You know hand-me-downs? Like Jamal will hand me down the belt to Jamal, right? Maul, I mean, nobody's there to hand me down shit for him at 168. But what does he get? He's in the running for the Canelo sweepstakes. You know what I mean? Something like that. So it's just something to think about. And of course, Mal could hand me down one of those belts to Spence.
Well, I appreciate the Roberto Diaz interview, him coming through. Y'all make sure to be watching. And if you're watching the archive, leave those comments below as to what you felt about the interview. Great interview from a great man and a guy who's done a lot, accomplished a lot in boxing, coming from a boxing fan. That's why I love his story. Is he's just a pure boxing fan who I think views the sport in a lot of those same ways that we do. And that's why I think he's a great interview.
And that's 100% true. And Andrew Malone is going to be Nakatani. We'll talk about that in another show.
Oh, we're going to talk about that because Nakatani, southpaw, long arms, going to jab Maloney to death and going to have him doing the hiccups. So, yeah, we need to talk about that later in the week, and there'll be an HCPX show later in the week. And the roundtable is where this week?
Tomorrow on my channel.
On D-Styles channel. Appreciate y'all coming through. God bless.